Make a start. And would you like to go live? Good, thank you. I'm oh, I'm Simon Carswell, Chair of the Licensing Committee. Welcome everybody, including members of the public who today's meeting and Diego online. Today's meeting will be run using the webcasting system via Teams. Committee members and key officers are physically present in the John Meikle room at Dean House. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or observe. This meeting is being webcast and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. There may be a slight delay between agenda items. The agenda pack with papers is available via ModGov or directly from the council website from the link which was sent out to members. When you're invited to speak, could you clearly state who you are for the benefit of anyone who is listening in? They can identify who is speaking. The meeting is being recorded. Finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present finding the appropriate information? Brilliant. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Diego Rod.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting? Can I just ask, as part of the last meeting, you're going to take away the training. Has any progress been made on that?
Yes, Chair, I've been looking at the different sorts of safeguarding training that are available. I've started to form a bit of a proposal. So, well, not before long, I would hope that we've got something we can bring back to the licensing committee with a view to adoptions. But I mean, you know, there are different options. I know at the meeting we spoke, didn't we, about the merits of online and face-to-face and things like that. Obviously, we need to come up with a system that's going to be achievable. So yeah, myself, Alan and Jack are looking at the different options, what's available, and yeah, we'll bring back some information to you.
Thank you. I know it's quite a big job because training with all the old authorities was completely different as to what level of training, and also there's cost implications, I suppose. If you did the ideal full hog training, then that cost implication. But if we're going to hear from something about that at another meeting, then that's fine. Tony?
Just briefly on that, welcome the news of that, but also within that, which is brought back, can it ensure that there is a system of recording of how and what and who drivers and what companies are trained. It's important to have a record. That is.
Yeah, duly noted, Councillor and Chair, and I think, in fairness, I think we would probably look to keep things really simple and make it a mandatory requirement whereby you know, you don't receive a license until you've evidenced that you've done that training. And if there were going to be something later on down the line, perhaps some sort of refresher or something like that, then it would form part of the renewal. You know, the more that we can line up with the sort of grant of the license and the renewal, the less chasing, the less records we need to keep. So I'm certainly in favour of that. I don't think that would be an issue.
Thank you. Just one final question for me, which is probably a silly question, but is there a public register of licensed drivers and firms?
Yes, I say that with some sort of caution. We are required to keep certainly a register of proprietor licenses. I forget exactly if we have a legal requirement to keep a public register of drivers. In all honesty, though, if someone were to make a freedom of information request, you know, about the people that we've got licensed, obviously there are certain personally sensitive details that we wouldn't reveal, but by and large we can we can clarify who and who isn't licensed. But in terms of public register, I'm not sure that there is for drivers, but I believe there is for vehicles, and we do publish details certainly of the wheelchair accessible vehicles on the website.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand that maybe the proprietors might be have a register of proprietors, but is there any obligation for them to keep a record for our benefit of their staff and their drivers?
I think I'm fairly right. It's a little bit tricky because we've naturally, because we've got the 5 legacy policies, some of which I'm more familiar with than others. I think I'm fairly confident in saying, in terms of proprietors, no, there wouldn't be any license conditions or anything that require them to necessarily keep records. I believe certainly in the case of Taunton, that they would have to keep a copy of the driver's license of any drivers they had driving their vehicles. So there's some sort of due diligence there. But of course, private hire licensing is slightly different because the operators are licensed, and there certainly are requirements for them to keep records of who they've got driving for them and the bookings they keep.
Thank you, Andy. I suppose the concern Andy was highlighting there is it's not exactly related, but like the Uber person who bit somebody's finger off, they weren't actually employed by Uber, or it was like subcontracted out. And worry is always that there's drivers who we don't know about who might have criminal records or might have something. Then an incident happens and we're completely unaware of that person. Anyway, thank you.
It's not to dwell on it because John said he's going to bring it back, which I would like a timescale when it's going to be brought back. But in the light of experience which we discussed at the last meeting, which we experienced in the hearing which we had, I think it's imperative that if we're saying what has to be and who has to be trained, that this authority keeps a record of who, what, and when are trained. That is imperative. And I'm talking in light of previous experience.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. I think John will note that. I think that's a good idea. Diego, I never know because it's an O. It's Diego. I've got a question. Diego.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that, we had on there resolved as well to raise the concerns with the lead member for transport and digital. So I'm wondering if that's been done. Do we have a response yet? And also, it was also resolved to inquire if the training provided by school transport team could be added to the work programme for scrutiny of children and families. Again, has that been done? It may also, just kind of looking at this, we didn't really put any timelines for these requests for us to hear back from them, and maybe in the future, just in hindsight, maybe putting that when we do our resolutions, saying that we want to hear back within X amount of time, perhaps as well.
Thank you. John, do you wish to comment?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I haven't personally followed up those particular resolutions with it was the raising it with transport, wasn't it? And so I can't provide an update on that, I'm afraid, Chair.
No, and I think, to be honest, if it was somewhat left to me as well to contact children and families, maybe from memory, I'm not sure, but we'll get onto that, Diego. And I think it's noted as well about having times to come back to us so that these matters don't drag, really. But we're hopeful with the matter we're talking about, it should be at the next meeting, if not the one after that. Thank you. Right, can we then put me out now with the minutes?
Happy to approve the minutes.
Yeah, happy to approve the minutes. Proposed. Thank you, Peter. Seconder. Marcus. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, Andy. Brilliant. Thank you. So we'll now move on to the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Testing and Emergency Equipment. John, you're going to speak on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I should have said it before. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, of course. I'm also I have a bit of a tendency to sort of talk quite loudly on the phone, so I am actually trying to. But I'll go with my usual volume then, and you should hopefully hear me. Yes. So I'm recommending the adoption of a policy specifically on Hackney carriage and private hire vehicle testing, and that is in order to harmonise the criteria, timing and frequency of safety and suitability tests across Somerset. In the report, I've described different arrangements that we've currently got. Like I say, we've got the 5 legacy policies that we've inherited. So within each of those policies, the testing arrangements are set out in there. Obviously, those individual testing requirements would be replaced by the policy that I'm recommending, and as an appendix I've actually set out all of the specific bits that would need to be amended for clarity. You might be wondering why we've brought forward this particular part of the policy for harmonisation before anything else, or the whole thing as one. That I suppose there is a little bit of urgency as far as we're concerned to appoint the vehicle test centres that actually carry out the safety and suitability tests. So in 2 of our formal council districts in particular, we're relying on 1 testing station in each of those to do all of the testing on the vehicles. They happen to be council test centres as well. You know, from a resilience perspective, that's not a good idea. You know, if there was an unfortunate incident like a fire or something like that that took it out, it would be difficult. We couldn't easily transfer the testing somewhere else, particularly because we've got different tests in being carried out across the whole of Somerset at the moment. So, and there is also the issue of the council test centres and their testing of minibuses, and and other work that they need to sort of balance out as well. So I think it's fair to say that they intend to concentrate their resources elsewhere. We need to look for new test centres. Is it in a nutshell? So with that in mind, at paragraph 2.2, I'm asking you to adopt the policy, but not to come into effect immediately, but sort of, if you like, from a point of my choosing. Now that might seem a sort of a strange request, but it's really so that we can bring the policy into effect when we're ready to go, with obviously some clear notice to the trade, because it would be too premature to bring it in now with the test centres we've got. We want to, subject to the policy being approved, go out, contact test centres, look to appoint some new ones, and then bring the new testing regime then in sort of all in one kind of swoop, if you like. And the other, I'm sorry, and I did want to mention as well, we didn't want to ask you to bring the policy in at a date that was perhaps too far into the future, so that if we were then ahead of the game, identified the test centres we wanted to use, but then had to wait for a date, obviously that wouldn't make sense either. In terms of the criteria, we're proposing that ultimately our check of a vehicle's safety and suitability for the purposes of licensing consists of an MOT, which we're all familiar with, I'm sure, and an inspection that goes by the standards that are already used in the former Mendip and South Somerset areas. In terms of the frequency and timing of those tests, we are proposing that the vehicles are checked at the point of the application for the grant of a license, and then again at the point of renewal. So a little bit like I was referring to earlier in response to the question about safeguarding training for drivers, it makes more sense to require evidence of checks and balances at the point of application. That's the point at which legally we're required to satisfy ourselves that something or someone is safe. So we would check it then, and that would be regardless of vehicle age as well. We've got different arrangements obviously at the moment, as the report explains. There have been 2 consultations. So initially, we began by proposing to harmonise the test criteria, and that was it. It didn't necessarily look at the frequency and also the emergency equipment side of things. But as I've said in the report, once the Department for Transport's best practice guidance was revised, obviously we familiarised ourselves with that. That changed our thinking, and it made sense to sort of bring forward a little bit more of a wider raft of changes. It just seemed to make sense to do it all as one. When we consulted with licence holders, so this would be the second consultation, if you like, we asked for their views on 4 aspects of this policy that we're seeking to adopt. So we effectively asked them, what are your views on each of these 4 things? So number 1 was the criteria of the test. Number 2 was the application procedure and the need to produce evidence that they passed the test at that point. Third was the frequency and the fact that we would effectively be, with the proposal, removing any existing requirements to have tests undertaken during the period of the licence, as well as, potentially at the point of application. And then the 4th proposal, if you like, was to remove the requirements for first aid and fire extinguishers. More licence holders in support of each of those proposals than not. And I think that's all I have to say at the moment, but obviously I'll take your questions.
Thank you, John. I suppose the resilience of the test centres was more of a problem when we were separate districts, because ideally, obviously, it'd be good to have more than one test centre in each area. But if, for instance, the Taunton centre burnt down, there would be the ability for them to have their vehicles tested in Yeovil or Shepton Mallet or wherever now, whereas before that perhaps wasn't the case. But
yeah, there is that. I mean, it's like I say, I think at the moment the only areas that, if you like, are interchangeable are Mendip and South Somerset, because they're effectively, the test is the same, whereas it's slightly different in the former Sedgemoor, Taunton Deane and West Somerset areas. So it wouldn't, yes, I'm sure we could navigate it, but it wouldn't be ideal. And the other thing as well, sort of taking into account, I suppose, the bigger picture as well, is does it make sense to have everyone who works in the former Sedgemoor area driving into Bridgewater to have their test done, when there might well be a centre in Burnham or Highbridge or someone like that that's perfectly equipped to do that? So I think we recognise that having more test centres than less is a good thing. So yeah, like I say, and it's all linked with that.
thank you. Questions from members? Tony? No?
Yeah, I'll start the ball rolling. Yeah, I mean, one, happy to leave it to officers as long as it's not left for 6, 9 months, 12 months to come back, because safety of the public is paramount. Yes, as with a lot of things, we're going into one authority now. Policies and procedures have to be aligned and everything else. And with, as we all know, with our own personal cars and everything else, that the, wherever you take it for an MOT or a test, the criteria for a pass or a fail is the same everywhere. And that must be the same with the vehicles which are being used to carry passengers. We have to bear in mind the public safety. So as long as the criteria, I'm not worried how many centres there are, as long as the criteria is the same for the tested in every centre, and that it comes back. As I say, I'm not one for leaving, like having things left open-ended. I like to know when they're coming back, and this is something which I think is paramount and needs to be done. Safety of public, as along with the previous statement I made about drivers and everything else. Thank you, Chairman. So one, I want an answer when it's coming back, and you've heard the rest of it, and I will make that a proposal if needs be.
Okay, so I suppose, John, we're looking for a reassurance that this isn't going, though you want us to leave it with you, we don't want this to drag on, and then in 6, 9, 12 months time, you say it's not ready yet.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that completely, and that is, that is absolutely not my intention whatsoever. Normally, I would naturally ask for a change to be made with immediate effect. Like I say, we're not ready. We're not in that position yet because we need to know that we've got test centres ready to go. By way of reassurance, I alluded to the fact that our council test centres have sort of recently taken on some more work there, having to do more minibus testing than perhaps than ever before, and that those pressures are on them immediately. So as far as we're concerned, they're concerned, there is an urgency here to sort of to do this as soon as possible. So this is a massive well, it's my number one sort of priority area of work at the moment. So the moment that I know that the moment that the committee resolved to give me the power to introduce that, my next step will be to write to all of the MOT test centres in Somerset to say who's interested, yeah, we want to do it as soon as possible. The earlier the better. So, like I say, the reason for the slightly unusual recommendation is because we're not in a position to bring it into effect immediately. That would obviously cause lots of confusion, and we're not prepared for that. But I'm also a little bit wary that if I was to say perhaps August or something like that, if we were in a position to start earlier than that, then we would want to. The other thing that I'm also waiting on as well is that we've sent a contract to our legal team to read through and sort of give their blessing to as well. So they haven't yet responded to that. So in terms of timescales, I'm certainly hoping that by the end of the summer, early autumn, we'll be in a position to begin then. I don't know if that is to Councillor Lott's liking or how we might get around that. As I say, not in a position, or we're not ready for it to take effect from now, but I don't want to pick a point in time, allowing so much time that actually we're ready before then, and we're having to kind of sit around and wait for that date to come to us.
I suppose what we need then is that every committee meeting we hold until this is done, we need an update as to how progress is going, and then some sort of timescale once you've honed things down. I assume the contract going to the legal team, you'll get that back within 3 years. And I don't know if I should repeat it, actually. Andy will tell you. The other thing, I suppose, would be it's ideal to have as many test centres as we can, but consistency of testing is very important. I'm sure it's not the same as when we were all younger, when you knew which test centre to take your car to make sure it passed its MOT. But we need consistency, and also it's local to the drivers. That's ideal, but you don't want it so local to the drivers that, I'm not saying they have influence, but they'd.
Just on that, I'm more than happy to bring back updates to each of the next committees so that you can see the progress that we're making with that. And based on conversations that we've had recently, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, we want a good, healthy number, but then there has to be a sensible limit, particularly if we're to sort of maintain communication with them all. If we had hundreds, that would be ridiculous. So I think 4 or 5 probably in each former district feels about right. If we can get a good geographical spread, then great. We'll have to see what sort of interest there is, but like I say, the next step is to write to them all to say this is what we're planning on doing. Please express an interest. Here's what we're looking for, and then obviously we would look to meet with them, talk them through the contract, and hopefully we can do that as soon as possible. So, but yeah, I'm more than happy to bring back updates.
Thank you, Diego.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things really. And forgive me because I'm new to licensing, so this may be something that everyone already knows the answer to. With the extra test centres, is there like an additional cost to having like a flat cost or whatever to having these additional test centres, or is it literally like just an MOT? You would go to it and pay 30 quid or 60 quid, whatever it is anyway? That's my first question.
So in terms of cost to the council, no, but to the vehicle proprietors, yes. Under the proposals, proprietors would have to have their vehicle undergo an MOT, standard, and then the vehicle and suitability inspection, which is, if you like, all the added safety and comfort things that go with a passenger carrying vehicle. What we will try and do when we engage with whichever garages express an interest, obviously, is look to encourage some sort of a deal or discount that can be offered when the two are done together. We don't want to. It seems unreasonable to force people to have to go to a particular pace to do their MOTs when obviously the DVSA registers and monitors those test centres. But yeah, if we can encourage some sort of savings so they can get value for money, then we'll obviously seek to do that. But those costs would all be met by the proprietors. I hope that answers the question.
Yep, thank you. And so is that are those costs something that's negotiated beforehand when you're kind of getting these test centres on board, or is it as and when people go forth and have their tests done? And also with the council test centres, the ones in Bridgewater and Yeovil in particular, I suppose that comes from what I can see in front of me. Is that, I don't know about those, is that something that is that in-house, is it? And would that cost different, would that be a different cost to taxi drivers compared to going to an external one?
So as things stand, like I say, there are different arrangements with yes, they are Somerset Council test centres. So the fees that they charge for carrying out the safety inspection for the former Sedgemoor area and the safety inspection for the former South Somerset area, there is a fee for that, which has gone through the council's fee setting process. So it's all within the reports. And the other garages, the external ones, set the price that they feel is appropriate. I think from memory, certainly in the case of the former Somerset Western Taunton area, there was a limit, a maximum that could be charged for carrying it out. But yes, as I say, hopefully we will get lots of interest from test centres wanting to provide these services, and as part of that, that may help us to sort of keep the cost down for the benefit of the trade.
Okay, thank you. So just to finish up on that one before my second question, it's just I don't know how comfortable I feel, but I'll just happy. I'm not in the room anyway, but I'm not sure how comfortable I feel about not knowing how many test centres we have, how much the cost of that is to licence holders, and almost agreeing that to be decided before we have any kind of say on that anyway. But I'm not in the room, so that's beyond me, I suppose. But my other quick question was, in terms of the 6 weeks notice that's proposed to be given to licence holders, I just want to make sure, is that enough time? And also I noticed on there, it says notice by email. We all get emails and we all know how many of our emails sometimes go to junk and we miss them. This is clearly going to be quite a change, and I wonder, is notifying license holders by email the right way forward with this particular change? Can they be notified by post to make sure they all get it?
John, do you want to come back, and then Andy has a question?
Yeah, of course. Can they be notified by post? Well, yes, of course they can. Obviously, there's an added cost to that. We have each of us for our if you like our respective areas that we've historically been responsible for, have been drumming into the trade for some time that we will seek to engage with them via email. That is the most cost effective way of making them aware of any updates or consulting them when there are changes to policy. Partly because, number one, obviously it's efficient for the service, but also that's a benefit to the license holders themselves, because obviously we seek to recover any of the costs through them. Personally, I feel that email notice is, particularly because we've done lots of engagement and with the trade, so they were made aware of the fact that this report was coming to the meeting, given an opportunity to register to come and speak. I personally feel comfortable with an email, but obviously if it was decided otherwise, then yes, we can arrange for it to be done by post.
I think as long as we have like an email acknowledgement confirmation it's been read, I can't see that that's not sufficient. And then if there's any mopping up to do, we could do that later. But just say not less than 6 weeks notice, so it could be more notice anyway.
Yeah, and sorry, the other question wasn't, it was about is 6 weeks notice enough time? I feel like 8 weeks is probably too much. 4 weeks felt like not enough, so 6 felt like a comfortable number. Again, just felt that it would be better to have a little bit of flexibility so that we can bring this in when we're ready to go. Not too early, but also not too late.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to costs and standardisation of criteria across the county. I would like to think that there will be set fees for those, as there are for a normal MOT now. So I mean, once that criteria is set to what the vehicles are checked to, because obviously that's going to have an effect on the operator, and also when you go out to inquiring to business that want to undertake this work, it's got to be. I think they're only going to take that work on if it's profitable to them, or so somewhere. What the point I'm trying to make is somewhere along the way that those costs have got to be fixed across the county, haven't they? They've got to be fair all the way across, and they really has to be a fixed price, in my opinion, as is a normal MOT, perhaps.
Yeah, like I say, certainly in one case already there is a maximum, and I think that would probably be sensible. I think I'm not sure about fixing it to one specific amount, because I think also there's the sort of competition side of things to factor in as well, and that can be good for the trade. If there are a number of testing stations and they're vying for the business, then that can be mean good value for money. But yeah, perhaps a maximum is a sensible thing then, like you say, to make it stop it from becoming unreasonable.
I think if we set a maximum fee, it's the same as when you have your MOT done. If there's extra work to be done, then that comes on top of that. But if it's MOT and the vehicle testing, most people do it at the same time, I suspect, and then there could be a maximum fee. Tony.
Yeah, if you're setting the maximum fee, I think you should set a criteria of what has to be tested. Hence, coming back to what Councillor Salton has just said, you've got a standard fee, you've got a standard thing which has got to be checked, and I think that should be it. Why should someone in somewhere maybe pre-priced for something else being slightly less than what that area is? I think it should be standard right across the board. Personally, that's my view. I don't know what other members are who haven't spoken on that. It would be interesting to hear their view. A standard price and a standard set of things that has to be checked, as you have now with your cars for MOT.
I'd like to think that the criteria would be the same. Yeah, and what has to be done would be set in stone. Yeah, Mike.
Thank you very much. I, in addition to that, I was looking at this criteria of test too stringent. I think you, Mr. Chairman, you were advised us that you felt that taxi drivers were already being oppressed by additional costs, and I appreciated your email about that. But at the same time, I'm a bit concerned that basically they've just swept away this idea that anybody turning up, not having checked or seeing a couple of small chips and a couple of scratches on their car would fail the test, or could fail. And they're saying here, as being too stringent, a number of stone chips and scratches to the body of a vehicle would result in failing the inspection. I mean, since when? I mean, if you put your car in with covered in scratches into an MOT test, it is, I mean, it's not a question. Okay, it's a question of appearance and a question of public confidence in our service. I appreciate that, but would it not be? What is the criteria? What is the level of scratch? I mean, do we say if it has 2 scratches and 2 stone chips, you're failed? If it has 3, you've failed. If it has 1, you've not failed. What's the story? I mean, there's no story. What they've said is that Mendip and South zones have adopted this without controversy. Nobody's complained. According to the VSI, within the bodywork standards, would therefore represent a reduction. If you don't have this in the VSI standards, it would represent a reduction in standards in those areas. So I'm just a bit concerned that how would you qualify that? Because some places in Somerset wouldn't even see some scratches. So how would you qualify that, Mr. Chairman?
I think that's a fair comment, Mike, because it could be we're being overzealous with those requirements, and a bit of mud might cover up a scratch as well.
Right,
So
yeah,
a dirty car could perhaps pass, whereas a clean one
Has
wouldn't.
anybody said anything about that?
So firstly, the vehicle has to be presented in a clean and tidy condition for it to be inspected. So no, you won't get away with that one. Secondly, yeah, I mean, that was one of the comments that came back, which is why I've highlighted that in the report. There were a number saying that they felt that was too stringent. Alongside the policy, we have created, which really is just a reinvention of the national inspection standards, which we're basing on. We have created the vehicle suitability inspection manual, which sets out all of the criteria and the specifics that the test centres will be looking at. It does say, and this is from the national inspection standards, that a failure would be where there are more than 8 stone chips visible on a bonnet grille that has not penetrated to the metal, or more than 4 stone chips that have penetrated to the metal, or, I mean, it does go on. I mean, I can read them all out, but there's a number there in reference to, so it is specific as to the number. And why have we sort of arrived at this? Well, this is, you know, there is no national standard, but there are the national inspection standards, which, you know, the various groups have come up with, and this is what is effectively already being used in the Mendip and South Somerset areas. So it feels sensible to go with that and bring the standard up to that level, which is already in operation in one part of Somerset or 2 parts of Somerset, rather than reduce that down without any real sort of reason for doing it.
I suppose if they are national standards, we really ought to fall in line with those. But I just wouldn't drive my taxi down a recently stone chipped road, I suppose.
I'm content with that response, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Tony.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report as it stands is very good. In a previous life, I was a mechanic and I looked after a lot of taxis. I can assure you the standard now, the expected standard, is far and above the standard when I was younger. The one worry I do have, I haven't got any worries about the report. One worry I do have is how long we're expecting to you know, what the leeway is between I wake up this morning and I need to get my tests arranged, and you're expecting that they're going to be able to do it within 6 weeks. I think that's what was said. I guarantee you right now in Wales, you can't get an MOT without at least an 8-week waiting list. Guarantee it, because there's not that many MOT testing centres. It is made very hard and very difficult to become one, but people don't, because they don't need the hassle. That's the worry I have. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, happy to answer that question. Sorry, I just realised I glanced down and I'd left my microphone on, so apologies there if I interrupted the sound in any way. I think Councillor Robbins, you're referring to the 6 weeks notice of implementing the policy. Well, to avoid any delays or anyone sort of falling foul of that, obviously there's been a lot of consultation already about what our intentions are. Depending on the outcome of this meeting, obviously we would look to do an announcement so that if it were decided that the policy were to be adopted, to be implemented at another date, then we would make the trade aware of that. And obviously, as part of the policy, when they actually had to present their vehicle for testing would be in line with the renewal of their license. So obviously, they would be fully aware of that. They would know when their vehicle is due to be licensed. If we were to say, by example, announce next week that this change was obviously going to be coming at some point in the future, and that we'll be giving you another further 6 weeks notice of that coming in, I think then that they would have had more than enough notice, because they would know when their vehicle license is up for renewal, to phone round and get that booked in. Oh no, beg your pardon, you're obviously thinking of the testing stations, aren't you? Okay. Right. Okay. Well, perhaps 6 weeks isn't enough then, if that's what Councillor Robbins is saying. So maybe 6 weeks isn't enough. It's kind of gone through now. The cogs are whirring now.
Okay, so perhaps we can look at that. Tony, are you happy with that? Thank you. Have we got any other questions? Marcus?
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, really good report. I found it fascinating reading the consultation responses. Extremely fascinating, actually. Probably should stop there. Although, it is quite interesting how many positive. Well, I'll start at the beginning first of all, with regard to the test, because you just talked about the timing of the test, and it's when you first apply and then renew. Well, I'm just assuming that if you're going to maybe apply for a license, etc., and apply for tests, the chances are you've probably just gone out and bought your car, which may have an MOT. So I'd wonder whether that it should be not done at the same time, or done if you need the test for your taxi and you got your test for your MOT. Could we, and would it be possible to have that test to be in between the MOT? Because you assume that if it's gone for an MOT, it's okay, generally safe. You'd like to think, even in West Somerset. And so therefore, if we had the test at a different interval, then actually what you're getting by default is by accident is 2 tests a year almost. And is that something you could generally do? That's the first point. And then I think I agree on the stone chips side of things, but I don't think that in this meeting at this stage, that's something we should, look into in too much detail now, because we could all have stories about, my car looks like a shed, and every time I get in it, something else falls off it, but it's probably it's as safe as anybody else's. But it's how we deal with that and how we look at that as a separate thing. And could we, if we wanted to, and there was enough interest or enough tax license holders who actually wanted us to look at those, the amount of stone chips, and are things failing the test on maybe things that are necessary, or is it just unfortunate if you have a dent the day before you take a test, or your car goes in, when actually if it happened the day after, it's not going to be spotted for 6 months. So you could be driving around for 6 months, quite a big dent. How we deal with that. And one little thing, the no smoking signs. I like to think we listen to consultations, and I just sort of think that, do we really need no smoking signs in taxis? Is it obvious? Actually, should it be done? Is it just no smoking and is vaping allowed? I don't quite know if I've missed that in the report, actually. Apologies if I have. So actually, I mean, do you generally need to, and it's just a little thing, do you need it? And bearing in mind that these drivers drive their cars probably when they're not working. It's just a little thing, but yeah, I'd like to think that, that suggestion. It says here, I have to remind customers who had a drink or two, but the stickers on my windows never made a jot of difference. I think is what Richard May have said. So I just wonder whether, there's a few things there that we could maybe change, or is there no reason to change? I think that's my questions for a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I've got a note of those, so I'm not going to necessarily answer them in the order that they were raised, but hopefully I'll give you answers to all of them. I'll start with the smoking signs. So it's a legal requirement, because a taxi or a private hire vehicle is a smoke-free premises, effectively. So It's a legal requirement. It's referred to in the national inspection standards. Therefore, we've carried that into the manual and the proposals. So it's as simple as that. It does sort of bring me on to the on the question or the concerns perhaps around chips and scratches and the stringency of the test. What I would say is, this, I think what we want to do to begin with is it's really important to us to standardize the tests so that we're, this really is a starting point. There is reference in the manual to meter testing. So I think we have got some ambitions. There are things I think in the future we'd like to bring into the test, and it might well be that actually based on feedback or evidence that there are reasons for other things to come out or changes in guidance. For instance, we're saying that actually, even though the national inspection standards mention a first aid kit and a fire extinguisher, in light of the guidance and because we don't feel we've got a good reason to, we'll take that out. So I think what I would say is, really keen just to have a starting point, and where absolutely can review it, keep it under review, and then add in or take things out as we see fit. And the question around the timing of the MOT, yeah, that's kind of something that features in some of the policies that we've got at the moment. Is, well, depending on how new a vehicle is, does it actually need to have one, or can it be provided later? The sort of angle I suppose that I've come at it from is that the point that the person applies for the license, that's when the council has a legal duty to satisfy itself that that vehicle is safe. And I think particularly under existing arrangements, there are scenarios whereby, hypothetically, the council is granting a license to a vehicle which may have had an MOT months and months ago. And it's at what point, how close does the MOT have to be to the application for us to feel like, well, it's probably still in good condition? As far as I'm concerned, yes, it might be only 2 months ago, but unless we've actually seen it recently, we can't be sure. So I personally feel that actually having it done with less than a month before the application is reasonable. And of course, after that, it's then in sync with the life of the license. So it may only be that 1 year that unfortunately the proprietor has had to have 2 done in sort of close succession. But after that, all things being well, it should just be done annually.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent response. I was just thinking about the stone chips regarding what's going on just with regard to what's going on with the fees, that maybe we could have maybe there could be a correlation between the maximum taxi fares charged and the amount of stone chips that they have on their vehicle.
But I'd just like to clarify the challenge from the Vice Chair in that my interest was in what was stated here as a number of. So a number of was quite something that I thought if you were punished for having a number of unspecified, which it says here in 4.1, then I would feel that it was unjustified, and it would seem over punishing, over egging the pudding. When this gentleman here came up and said more than 8 chips and more than 4 scratches, I thought that's pretty shoddy. In other words, that would make sense to me that we are now quantifying. So if you had actually put into this thing here more than 8 and more than 4, then that would qualify it, and that would be no argument whatsoever, and therefore I was content. I would like to suggest that would be what we could do, put it in this panel. So if someone said it's only 2, if you get 2 scratches and you don't sort them out, you failed. But if you get 8 and 10, well, that's different.
I think the actual number is in the appendix, isn't it, John?
Yeah, so Councillor Murphy's right. Yes, in the report I was general about the number of stone chips.
No criticism of you.
No. So for clarity, in the manual it is very specific, so there would be no or there should be no ambiguity about how many you've got and whether that's a pass or a fail. So it's a good spot, but I'm glad that it's covered.
Just before I go to Tony, I suppose what the thing I perceive is that we adopt the national standards. Then if we get lots of complaints from drivers saying this is unreasonable because whatever the issue is, then we can look at it. But Tony,
I mean, I like the officer's report and what you've said, and then I stick on the bit like you've got two areas which has got a standard. You don't want to drop your standards. You need to bring everything up to a standard. And I also like the officers when he said that any policy can be brought back and changed. This has already been consulted on, so we're not here to redesign it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm satisfied with the officer's report and his comments that it is going to be brought back. Policy can be reviewed and can be changed and tweaked moving forward. Correct? That is what I'm quoting your words now, as far as I know. So that's all I want to say. We're not here to redesign it.
thank you, Tony. That's some good points there, and I think we've got to take that on board. Yes, John.
Yeah, Chair, just, I mean, I don't know whether there are any, going to be any other questions, but I was just sort of thinking more about Councillor Robbins' point around perhaps the waiting times in maybe the Mendip area for booking tests or others, which I hadn't necessarily appreciated. Whether the committee wished to sort of give some thought and discuss when this policy might come into effect and hopefully you're in support of the proposal to adopt it. It's just about how we can make that implementation easy. So if there's a better way for that to be worded, then I'm all in favour of that. I'm all ears.
I think, John, we'll go to the vote in a second, but at the moment you've got it as 6 weeks, haven't you? I think if a driver came to us and genuinely said, look, I cannot get a test within 6 weeks, you'd give him that extra week's leeway or whatever. I don't think we...
I suppose the good thing in this case, because we would be standardising the test, is that there should, in theory, be more choice. And they wouldn't be limited to just the former Mendip area. So in theory, if they were desperate, then we would, from that point onwards, be able to say, well, look, I know it's not ideal, but actually you can go to Taunton or you can go to Bridgewater or somewhere else. So we would have that as well.
Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that we have to have some form of timescale, but I think what we're missing here actually as well is that the owner, operator or driver of that particular vehicle knows that he's got to get that done. So there's a responsibility for him to ensure that he can get that booked in somewhere. And as you've just said, if we're standardising across the county, then he's got options to go to different places. So there is an emphasis on the person. We all know when we have to have our car MOT, we've got to get it done. So we go around to book it in. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I think, yeah, that's a good point. And what I was just thinking as well is if I'm going to be providing the committee with some updates, then if after we've sought expressions from interest from garages, we're concerned about the number and the availability, then perhaps we can come up with a plan B then. But maybe the best thing to now is to stick with the plan, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Right, I think we've debated this quite a lot. Oh, sorry, Martin, you wanted to say something?
Chair, it's more a general question, not just the testing. Are we? I'm happy to go into a more general question. Yes, fine. Just talking about the thing about fire extinguishers and first aid kits. Fire extinguishers, I understand. Get out of the car and get somebody who knows how to deal with a fire to deal with it. Don't do it yourself. Logical. But first aid, I mean, first response could be required anywhere. What if people don't have first aid kits? What is the expectation in case there is an incident in the car that has to be dealt with? What's the thinking around that covers that if that's to be removed? I agree that first response and first aid kits are two different things, but it's just how is that area covered? Thank you.
I think that it is slightly different. However, I think that there is a real fear amongst the trade about that they are expected to perform first aid, and there's a worry that if they were to provide someone with some assistance or a plaster or something like that, then they're leaving themselves, open to litigation. I'm not sure how, I would think that in most cases, people would just be grateful for the assistance. But I think the thing is, again, for me, my professional opinion, it feels a little bit too onerous to force them to carry that kit when actually we are not expecting them to provide first aid. So I personally question the value in it being mandatory. And I think if they wish to carry that and they're happy to offer that to someone, then great. But it just, for me, feels a little bit too much to ask them to carry it.
Thank you. I think Mark has got one final question and then we'll bring this to a close.
It was actually on that, it was on the similar point, actually, of the fire extinguishers. And again, looking at the response to the consultation, you can say it was probably mixed. But obviously, you're meant to have a first aid kit in at your workplace, etc., and have qualified people to use it. Well, I suppose my question would be, and I suppose I always remember, bearing in mind, I used to do friends' weddings many years ago, and the first thing I always used to make sure I had needle, cotton, and safety pins in the cars when I picked up the bridesmaids. Now, do you think that actually most of the taxi drivers out there are going to bin the first aid kit and the fire extinguishers, or do you think most of them will? I mean, do you think half of them are going to keep them anyway?
I wouldn't.
It was more of a point of insight.
I wouldn't like to say. I mean, I think I would imagine most people aren't necessarily, unless they're desperate for the space in the back, gonna sling it in the bin. But part of it is as well is that in requiring them to carry a first aid kit, obviously things need to be in date as well. So there's all that sort of goes alongside it. But I'm afraid I wouldn't know. I wouldn't like to guess.
Absolutely. Right. Can we resolve that the aforementioned policy comes into effect on a date to be determined by the licensing manager specialist, prior to which licence holders will be given no less than 6 weeks' notice via email. Doing so means the implementation is coordinated with the nomination of test stations. Can I have a proposer for that? Andy, seconder, Peter. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Right. Now we go on to the minutes of the licensing and regulatory subcommittees, which are at the back of the report. I think there's 4 of them. Can we just agree the minutes? Just note the minutes. Everybody's happy with those? Good. In that case, I think I can bring the meeting to a close. The next meeting is, Steve's going to tell me. While he's doing it, I'd just like to thank all members who've attended subcommittees over the past few months. It is good to know that everybody, I think, on the subcommittee now, on the committee, are attending subcommittees at some time or another, which is brilliant. Thank you.
Steve, just while you're looking, I did notice on the website that we've got a date in May currently. I know that we discussed perhaps reducing the frequency, but Alan, Jack and I have come up with some business that we might wish to bring to you in May, which is linked to payment licensing. And
May.
Yeah. 16th of May.
Okay, so
There's one June. That's when the new cycle starts.
right, okay.
So we're on
Yeah.
monthly up till May.
Yeah, thank you.
Then we've arranged, instead of monthly meetings that we ended up cancelling, we've gone down to 4 scheduled meetings for the next municipal year. However, that doesn't stop us having a special meeting should we need to bring something in to meet the council deadlines to get something adopted.
So the next meeting is set for the 16th of May, unless we advise you that it's not required. Thank you all very much for attending.